Hi, I'm Stacy Treckless, and I want to talk to you today about the major project for EDCI 575, which is the creation of an online instructional module. This can be a piece of a course or it could be a whole course. It really depends a lot on you and the nature of the topic that you chose. And I'll be able to show you some examples during this video that might help you scale down or scale up maybe the idea that you might have brewing about what you'd like to create your module on. This is an assignment that we are going to build over the course of much of the semester. So what's going to happen is that we're going to take things in little bits and pieces, and then we're sort of going to put it all together towards the end, and eventually you'll have something that really comes out and looks really cool, and you'll get to choose your technology that you use and all the strategies and things that you use to put your content together. So yes, you will be learning a new technology, but you do get to choose which technology you learn, and I promise that none of them are terribly difficult to get to know. This is certainly not web design. You can, feel good that it's not going to be a huge hurdle for learning the technology. It's the feature here is really the content of the module that you create, because we're spending a lot of time with the instructional design elements so that you really create instruction that is adheres to objectives that are task-based, that are problem-based, that are interesting and engaging to the students. Because as we know, when we're online, we can't see our students and we don't know how they're reacting to the instruction that they're receiving online. So we have to try and make it as engaging as possible and hit every angle so that they're going to stay interested and so that they'll be able to learn in the way that works best for them, even if we're not over their shoulder helping them out. So there are several pieces to this, as I mentioned. And this video will go in stages, so you'll be able to click through into different chapters in order to skip to different portions of the video as the semester rolls on and as stuff is interesting to you. Maybe you would like to look at stuff over again, etc. So this will be segmented up, but it's a long one, so hopefully you'll be able to stick with me on this. Now, the major project description you'll find here in the first part, where we'll go through our different pieces. And the very first thing that we do is we brainstorm for a little bit. We're going to complete a little what I call the online teaching worksheet. And it's just a simple Word document, and there's no right or wrong answers. It's all about brainstorming. This is going to be one of the first things that you submit to your critical friend, which, of course, your critical friend wiki is always here on the left, plus it's inside the major project module as well. So you've got several different places you can go to for that, but you'll submit this project as well as a lot of other these things to your critical friend first, so that they get a chance to give feedback and help you out throughout this process, because it really is iterative. I'll be there too, but your friend is key, because you're going to help them too, and they need your help. So make sure that you are checking in on that wiki frequently and really being a team player and helping your friend out, because they need your help just as much as you need them. So I'm just going to show the teaching worksheet just briefly. It's pretty easy to follow. It's not meant to be hard. It's certainly not meant to be punitive or anything like that. You do get 10 points for completing it, and it's kind of a did you complete it or not? It's a pass-fail kind of thing. So you pretty much, if you just don't put any effort into it, that's the only way you can get a 0 on this. So just try your best. Come up with some answers to these questions as they come through. So what's your topic, or what do you think your topic might be? I've had people do courses on everything from cooking to math and science-based kinds of things, to English, to a motorcycle riding course, to all kinds of things. It's really, there's no shortage of what different topics you could come up with. However, I would kind of recommend that you keep it simpler rather than try and go to the extreme. Case in point, last semester I had a student who was a psychology major in her former life, and that's what she taught at the high school level, was psychology and sociology and things like that, social studies. But that was her big thing, was psychology, and she wanted to do a psychology course, like a whole course for her high school students. And I was like, hold on now, wait a minute, that's a big topic, right? It's huge. You don't want to take on that whole thing and actually try to create the entire thing in the course of one semester. That's a lot to bite off. So what she did was she scaled it down to one module about just the behaviorism Pavlov theory and how that all works. So operant conditioning. And it was very focused. It was just about operant conditioning. There was no other content there. It was just that. She may have had some placeholders for other content, like if it were to continue and she was able to add more in the future, but it was specifically just the Pavlov unit that we were looking at, and that's how we evaluated her. And it wound up being great because she was able to focus all of her energy just on that one topic. She was able to create as many different exercises as she wanted to. Most of the exercises were pretty short because, of course, these are high school kids, so you don't want to get too out into extreme research and theory-based territory. You want to just keep it simple so that they understand what operant conditioning is and be able to sort of distinguish between operant conditioning, classical conditioning, and so forth. So that's a great example of someone who is able to take a big idea and scale it down to something a little bit smaller. So I would suggest that if you're in that boat, that you kind of think about that too, and focus it. Keeping things shorter and more focused is really going to be to your benefit. So this is a chance for you to brainstorm some of those ideas. You might completely change your topic after you talk to your critical friend and maybe other members of the class and me a little bit, but this is your chance to, just write some stuff down. Whatever comes to mind. What are you interested in? Maybe this is your chance to learn about a new topic that you're just sort of interested in and never really had a chance to learn much about because, you didn't take a class on it. It's not really in your area, but you just like it. Like me, I kind of think science is cool, and I like anthropology and things like that. So if it were me, I might want to do a little unit on some particular aspect of science or anthropology. I have no real background in it, but I think it's interesting, and I'm pretty sure that with enough, research, I could put together a decent little unit about that topic, maybe for, say, high school or middle school kids. So that's the kind of thing that you want to think of when you're trying to come up with a topic. And I'm introducing you guys to a slightly different way to design course instruction and instructional design in general. You may have learned in EDCI 572 the Morrison, Ross, and Kemp model of instructional design, that big circle. You got little circles and you follow all the little circles around in something of a pattern, pretty much a process. You start with designing at the beginning, understanding, who your audience is, and then tailoring your objectives to your audience's needs, and then tailoring your, strategies to your objectives, and so forth and so on. Merrill's design is the first principles model, he calls it, and I've got the link to his paper, the original paper. There's other papers at his website too. If you go to mdavidmerrill.com, there's all kinds of other papers. Pretty much everything he's ever published is up there, and he's kind of considered one of the modern fathers of instructional design. He's really what's given us a lot as far as what we know now about instructional design and what good instructional design looks like. He's a really good person to at least be kind of familiar with. As graduate students in instructional design and technology, you should be able to throw out a few names, drop a few names in conversation when somebody asks you about instructional design, and Merrill is a good name to drop. So if you're thinking along those lines, this is something to just be aware of. And his model is such where you start with the problem. What's the problem? And his real focus is on real-world problems, which is very constructivist in its focus. Even though he himself isn't really considered a constructivist, he considers himself more of a behaviorist or even a cognitive kind of theorist where, things that he discusses are more from the aspect of how the brain works rather than how we construct knowledge in this open environment and we discover and learn. It's kind of the more touchy-feely kind of approach to learning, as I like to call it. So we start with this real-world problem still, and then we need to solve it somehow. So we go through the actions of trying to figure out how to present the problem in such a way to students that they understand that they can activate their prior knowledge, right? And so they can, go back to what they know already and start to relate parts of this problem and how maybe it could be solved with things that they already know. And then we move towards, okay, well, here's the problem's solution or ways that people have solved this problem. And then the instructor sort of demonstrates what a finished, completed problem might, or, solution might look like. Then we try to apply it. So, students get practice. Could be with just parts of the whole. It could be sort of, moving towards a direction of completing and solving this problem. And then by integration, now we've completely integrated it with our prior knowledge. We can, turn this problem around quickly. We can solve it effectively. So it starts here. It works clockwise around the problem. And it shares lots of similarities with other things that It's just sort of a different way of thinking about the same stuff. All instructional design theories are kind of like that. So once you kind of know that, it's really easy to look at all kinds of different theories and models and say, oh, I get that. That's just like Addy, or that's just like, Morrison, Ross, and Kemper. That's just like Merrill. It's all very related to each other. But we're using this model partly so that you get exposed to different theories and different models, and also because it allows for a lot of play and a lot of work within. Since it's not as systematic as Morrison, Ross, and Kemp, you can kind of go back and forth a little bit more easily. It's a little more fluid. So hopefully you enjoy kind of exploring a different way to look at instructional design. And we'll use this model throughout our development of the instructional module. So while you're completing this, you'll kind of go through the model. Let's start with an objective. Some sort of an ABCD objective. We're still looking at those ABCDs, which you might remember from your 572 class if you took that one. But it's the audience, the behavior, the condition, degree, right? So, for example, I will write one off the top of my head. How about, and personally, just for grammatical purposes, I usually do condition, audience, behavior, degree. So I flip condition, audience, because usually we write these better. They read a little bit easier when we do this. So we might say, after reading the lesson on grammar, or it could be, given something, we could even add that, and given access to a computer. Middle school students, so there's our audience. We've got a condition, after the lesson on grammar and given access to a computer, middle school students will be able to. This is where our behavior comes in, and we want a really good action verb here. We don't want verbs that we can't see. We need to be able to see the students doing this thing, whatever it is. So in this case, we're reading, maybe students will be able to diagram. I loved diagramming sentences when I was in school, and I found out that they don't really do that anymore in school. I was kind of bummed when I found that out, because that was really one of my favorite things to do in English class. I guess I was weird that way, but that's probably why I write pretty well right now. So, let's go with that, even though they probably don't do it that much anymore. But the students will be able to diagram at least 3 sentences with subjects, verbs, and direct objects effectively. Or we could, if we don't even want to use the word effectively, which is sort of vague, we might say with 90% accuracy or something like that. So there's our degree. So we've got our condition, reading and getting access to the computer. It could be something else too, getting access to pen and paper. In this case, middle school students, there's our audience. They'll be able to diagram. So there's our behavior, and then our degree. The degree to which we're going to evaluate this behavior is at least 3 sentences with subject, verbs, and direct objects at 90% accuracy. So that is perhaps not the best objective on the planet, but not a bad start, and it is ABCD. So try to keep those ABCDs in mind, because they really do help you form not only better objectives, but better everything. Because from this, now you have an assessment pretty much built into this sentence, right? 3 sentences, direct objects and verbs. There's my assessment. Now I know how I'm going to assess the students. And I also could probably figure out some decent lessons to put along with this that go into demonstration application, right? Because sentences with subjects, verbs, and direct objects, now I've got 3 different things that I can talk to them about. They can apply in each of those scenarios and eventually start integrating all 3 of them together so that they're diagramming all of those sentences. So as far as activation and demonstration, they will kind of almost fall out of the objective. If you write it well, these things all just sort of fall into place. And I've tried to give you some tips and some ideas and things to think about as you brainstorm all of these different items under each principle. So by the end, you should have at least one kind of fairly well put out idea for something that you're going to teach in your online module. It might not be the final version. Of course, it's very unlikely to be the final version. This is just for brainstorming. This is for getting your ideas out there. But of course, the last one is to talk, think about some of the things as far as being online, how you're going to deliver this to your audience. What are the things you want to be sure to do? What are the things you want to be sure your students do so that everybody learns effectively? Because obviously this environment is different than maybe what you've taught in the past. Some of you might have taught online. Some of you might never have taught online. Some of you might not even have had a lot of experience as online students. So in that regard, this is a good practice exercise and a way of getting all those ideas out there. So you'll submit the online teaching worksheet to your critical friend and have a little discussion, and that should help the juices get flowing as far as what it is that you're actually going to do, so that eventually you can start writing your topics, your goals, your learner analysis. And this is not really long. This is not meant to be a long, huge, drawn-out thing like you might remember from EDCI 572, but it's a little shorter, meant to just sort of solidify some of these ideas that you just talked about in the online teaching worksheet. So, who are these learners you're working with? What is the goals and topics that you finally settled on after brainstorming for a while? So you're going to start really hammering down the finer points of this in step 2, and you'll turn this into your critical friend. I've got resources to help you along the way throughout all of these stages. After you discuss with your friend a bit about this, you can move on to the planning grid. So with the planning grid, you'll notice that there's another download here, and this is another template. I have one up already. This is the blank version of it. There's a little introduction, which of course you can delete that introduction as you will. But you can see, I'll make this slightly bigger, we can see it easier. You can see that it's laid out like Merrill's framework again. So we've got our task in the center, and then we sort of move around in a clockwise direction. So, what are you going to do to activate prior learning? Gain everyone's attention, get everybody on board. That's the first thing. And then you move on to, how are you going to demonstrate what effective objective attainment looks like. And then how are we going to start to practice making these connections so that we can actually get our applications going and we can start meeting this objective. And then finally, how will we really know that they've been able to complete the whole task, they're performing satisfactorily? So this is almost like you can consider it like a final assessment. So, introduction, little further demonstration kinds of things, application and practice, and a final assessment. So you can sort of think about those phases in that way, which is not too dissimilar from a lot of the other models that you might be familiar with already. It's just sort of organized in a different way. And I even have an example of a partial grid, a sample grid that I put together. And you can see it's got, what you're basically going to be doing is copying and pasting this for as many different objectives as you might have. So in this case, there's only two. Obviously, with something on cybercrime, there might be many more objectives. There might be just a few more. If you're kind of looking for a quantitative measure of how many objectives you're supposed to have, it's hard to say exactly. However, most people are around 5 to 7 objectives for their whole instructional unit. So you might have about 5 to 7 pages of this grid copied and pasted over and over again. You may have a couple fewer, you might have a couple more. If you're getting past 10 objectives, you're probably planning too much. I will say that. However, I do have some people that prefer to plan a large lesson out and not actually necessarily complete everything for their actual instructional module content. Like I described to you earlier, some people like to sort of put it all out as a skeleton, but maybe they'll actually only concentrate on, say, 4 out of the 12 or, something objectives that they come up with. So that is something to keep in mind. You can obviously copy and paste these as much as you want to. Make a new page and just copy paste, as much as you need to for this. And you can see on the sample grid that there's a nice ABCD level objective in the center, and then just some sort of basic bullet point sort of items describing what's going to happen at each of the phases. So you don't have to write a novel here. You don't have to write extremely, verbose descriptions of what it is that you're doing. You're just sort of giving us a quick summary. We're going to discuss, we're going to introduce, we're going to ask the students, we're going to show a video in this one, and then the students will respond to like a case study kind of thing, and they'll do a discussion about it, and then at the end they'll be able to write their own case study. So that, that's a way to address this issue of how to distinguish between cybercrime and traditional crime. And in the second one, we kind of keep going with this. Now we have 10 different cases. So there's a degree level put right there at the beginning. We need to be able to deal with these 10 cases with at least 80% accuracy, understanding common warning signs of internet predator attacks. So another thing, what is this whole internet predator thing all about? Let's understand how that happens, all the danger warning signs and things that we need to worry about. And then how are we going to sort of apply that? Again, I used a discussion forum. This isn't certainly the only way to do practice. Depending on the kind of activity that you're dealing with, it could be maybe a practice test. Maybe you have a series of tests that you want people to be able to do in order to get ready to practice, to actually complete a final exam of some kind. Maybe they're just writing like quick reflections or quick statements that they're going to just submit to the instructor. Maybe it's a partially done draft of a project, and then by the end they submit a final one. In fact, if you've taken the human issues course, we can use an example from that. If you think about the way the units are designed in the human issues course, we have our objectives, right? Of course, we might have a series of related objectives here, and that's okay too. So each unit might only have its own one planning grid per unit in that case, because you'd have a series of related possibly, and it would really depend a lot on how that's structured. And of course, you're going to submit drafts to your critical friends, so certainly you're going to be using your own application style quite a bit during this as well. And so if you've maybe grouped a series of objectives in the middle with similar tasks and practice going around that, it might be that me or your critical friend might say, these are really kind of, maybe they do need their own separate grids. There's a little too much going on, and that's okay. But if we're using, say, the human issues class as a guide, we might think that, we've got our task, right? We're, putting together one piece of that large puzzle that we're creating in that class, one piece of that project. We activate, we talk about it a little bit, we do some research, right? So, and then maybe you look at a demonstration example of what a finished product looks like, because I have those, and then by application, that's peer review time. So you've submitted a draft and you're doing peer review with your friends. And then by the end, you've submitted a final version. So there's your 4, phases going through. We actually go through these phases quite a lot in all kinds of different instructional settings. So if you think about it like this, and it really becomes rather easy to fill out this grid. Now, I will point out, as we keep going with this, there are some examples. We have some demonstration examples of what finished ID plans look like. So this is going to wind up that you're going to have a complete instructional design plan for your module before you ever really even start work in Blackboard or Moodle or Lore or My Big Campus. However, some of these are from older semesters where we didn't do the planning grid that I just showed you. We had a different planning grid. So, like for example, I'll look at Brad's here because his is all in one piece, and he's got his little summary. He's got his problem statements, so forth, his goals, learners, analysis, etc. This is the planning grid that they used at that time when he took the class. And there's certainly nothing wrong with that. It's just a little different, different way of doing things. And actually, in this case, you could see how it could be similar. It just rearranged differently on our new planning grid. So there's the objectives in the center, and then we start coming over what the instructor does. So that becomes, demonstration and activation level stuff, and then the learners are doing their thing at the application and the integration phases. And by the end, you've got full integration as far as, how do we know whether they've completed the objective? So it's just kind of a different way to display the same ideas. So even though theirs doesn't look like the one that you're working on, it's not too dissimilar, and you shouldn't have too many problems sort of translating this view into the new view that you guys are using. And speaking of the rest of this, we will have a course map and a little assessment plan that we want to kind of use to help us organize the class that you're, or module, or whatever you want to call it, that you're creating. So no matter whether you're using Moodle or Blackboard or Lore or My Big Campus or whatever it is, this is probably a good time to actually explore the technology, because by this phase in your ID plan, this is the time where you might actually want to know what your technology looks like. And it's a time to also sort of take some time and look at each one. If you're not familiar with a lot of these products, take a little time to explore them, to see what they're all about, and then maybe, make a decision based on what you see. Maybe some of them are easier to work with than others. Maybe some of them offer you certain features that you're looking for in an online course. Whatever the case, I would definitely take some time at this point to explore the technologies themselves, because some of that is going to influence the course map. You're going to create sort of a course map that describes, what students are clicking on, how they're getting through your course. It's a really useful thing, because then you kind of have a flow chart of how activity happens within your course. So, and again, we have examples, and I'll go back to Brad's because we were just looking at it. He's got a course. He wound up using Moodle for his, although he actually originally chose Blackboard instead. So this was actually written originally for Blackboard. And you can see he's got, each little phase of what you click on in Blackboard, who's online and my grades and, home page announcements and so forth. And then each one of these is another click. Syllabus, course calendar, meeting rooms, all those kinds of things. Each one of these boxes is a click that students could click on to go somewhere within the course. Another example, let's see how these other ones are in 3 parts just because when I made them into PDF files, they had some that were portrait and some that were landscape, so they wound up making separate files. So here's Nettie's, and I believe her course map was on the 3rd page. So she's got sort of a sequence going on here instead of a map. She did not make a graphical map, which is okay. You don't have to make a graphical map. Some folks kind of chose not to make a graphical map for whatever reason. They just sort of didn't like it. So if you'd rather do some sort of an outline format, that's perfectly okay too. And she was using Moodle, so she kind of followed along with the Moodle outline structure, because Moodle does have a very much of an outline structure to it. And so there's your introductory block. Here's each of the different main clicks within that block and what's happening inside them. Then we got block 1, more clicks, this is what's happening, etc., etc. So instead of the more graphical view like what you saw with Brad, you have more of an outline view. And all those ways and anything in the middle are perfectly okay. There's no right way to make a planning or a course map. It's just what you kind of prefer and what makes the most sense to you. So especially with for example, with Moodle here, Moodle really lends itself to this format because it is an outline. The actual structure of the online class is an outline. So to sort of provide an outline format for our course map just kind of makes sense. And I already have hers up, and hers wound up being a good example of an assessment plan. So this sort of a lot of people use tables when they do the assessment plan, and they talk about it's just a way to sort of highlight the assessments that's going to happen. And this is also a chance for you to show off some of the rubrics that you might be using, or maybe test questions if you don't really have rubric-based kinds of things. Whatever works for you. But she's got, here's her objective, and this is how we're going to assess whether they met that objective. It's just kind of a shortcut version of the planning grid where we're focusing just on the assessment. And then we have grading, and you don't have to use a specific format. You could just write. A lot of people just write narratives. You could do some sort of combination of a table or a bullet list with something else, with some discussion or something. It's completely up to you. Again, it's just highlighting the assessment that happens so that we kind of know how everybody's going to be graded, how we're going to know specifically whether people are meeting their objectives or not in the course. And a few samples would be really great if you can get them. Assignment samples, a rubric, a quiz, whatever that is, however that's going to look. She's got a rubric. She's also got sources at the bottom, which you should, if you're using sources, you should have some sources listed, although that's not essential. If you're not using any sources, then you probably don't have to list them. But, in her case, she's got an assignment example and a little rubric, and that's pretty much what she's got for this particular assessment plan. Of course, this is still the planning stage, so things are going to grow and they're going to change. And, by the end, when she actually completed her course, she had some of these things, and, some of these she made some small edits to, and that's perfectly normal and that's perfectly okay. But this is a way to sort of help you get all those ideas out there and really plan this course out as well as you can before you ever really get your hands dirty and get in there. It really is a helpful thing to do. So you're going to summarize it briefly. You're going to introduce it with your problem statement, your goals, all the things you did at the beginning, your learner analysis. Then give us your objectives, your first principles strategies in that planning grid, your course map, your assessment plans and items. Okay, so that's going to be the completed ID plan, and that's going to be one of the few things that you submit directly to me after you've spent all this time submitting each one of these things individually to your critical friend and spending time revising it, revisiting things, getting it just so. You will eventually turn that whole document in to me. So, and that will be that'll be one of the bigger things that we do during the semester, because this is a big step. Now you have this whole thing planned out. Now it's really time to get in there and actually make this happen. So it's almost like a blueprint towards what it is that you're going to create in Blackboard, Moodle, My Big Campus, or Lore. And again, there's more examples. I won't take you through all 4 of them, but they're all good examples of different ways to sort of construct this document. And feel free to use your own creativity and your own ideas about how to put this together. Have a little fun with it if you want to. Use graphics. A lot of people like to use graphics and things. Some people just like to write and use more narrative, and that's perfectly okay too. Putting a page limit on it is very difficult because everybody's got a different idea, and sometimes a lot of things are graphical, so graphics obviously take up more information on the page. Plus you've got this planning grid thing, which is a little bit bigger than some of these examples, because maybe just one objective per grid. So now you've got maybe 5 or 6 pages of these boxes over and over again. So it winds up that you could have anywhere from a 7 to a 20-page document. I would not spend much time worrying about the quantitative angle of how many pages you have on this particular project, because it might be that you'll have a whole bunch and not really realize it, because by the end it's like you've put all these pieces together and all of a sudden you've got this really big document that you've been working on and didn't even know it. So don't get wrapped up in that detail. That's not a very important detail, and just let it be the length that it needs to be, whatever that winds up being. So at this stage now, you've turned your ID plan in. Hopefully you've already started to construct your instructional module, but even if you wait till after your ID plan is finished, that's the time to really dig in and really get into your program of choice. Now I have videos for each one of these, so I won't spend a lot of time looking specifically at examples or anything here in this video, because you'll be able to see examples in my other videos for each of these topics. So don't worry too much. I will tell you that at this time I don't have too many My Big Campus or Lore examples because they're pretty new. So I just have one Lore example, and I really don't have any My Big Campus examples. Those doors are really wide open. But I do have lots of Vista examples, which many of those will be enrolled. You'll be enrolled into them when you log in. And I have some Moodle ones too, and you'll be enrolled into those as well. And there is a access information guide, so make sure you do take a look at that, because it does explain everything, how to get into each system. So how to get into Vista, how to get into Moodle. Lore, you can sign yourself up, so you really don't need a lot of help from that from me. And My Big Campus is something you have to be invited to, unless you have it. If you're a teacher and you have it at your school already, you can certainly use your own account. But if you don't have an account yet and you need one, I can invite you to it and get you an account. But you'll have to express that you want an account, and then I'll invite you. So that's all you got to do, is just let me know, and I'll invite you to it. And there are some tips, and there's some various things here. There's all the different videos and other links to other kinds of tutorials as well. So there's no shortage of help for any of these programs. They are generally pretty easy to get along with, but they've also, Blackboard Vista's been out for a long time. Moodle's been out for a really long time. Lore is pretty new, but they have some really great resources. Same thing with My Big Campus. So you're never at a loss for help, whether that comes directly from me or from your critical friends or from the internet. So don't worry about being lost in the technology, because these technologies are not that hard to get used to. You should be able to get along with them pretty well. And of course, we are using the Quality Matters rubric. So you may want to have that rubric kind of with you and handy. You know, here's the link, and it's linked in a few other places within our course as well. But this is the 35-point abbreviated rubric. Then this is what you'll assess each other on, and you'll also be assessed by me. So you'll get 35 points for peer review, and my assessment counts double, so it'll count as 70 points. Not that mine is necessarily better than yours, it's just kind of works out that way, because I'm really taking a really close look, but I won't take a really close look at your courses until they're done at the very end of the semester. So don't worry, you've got lots of time between now and the end of the semester to really hone this and get it good. In fact, I don't even look at them until after your peers have looked at them and provided their feedback. So that's one more chance that you have to go in and fix something. If your peer mentioned that you've got bad links or some sort of typo or something somewhere, you've got a little time to fix that before I actually look at it. So I'm really truly looking at the finished version when I follow the rubric. But you should probably have this rubric nearby. Print it off for yourself. Have it handy. Make sure you're covering all of these different objectives, because if you can do that, you can say that you've covered them with confidence, you're going to be in super shape. It's really going to be a great experience for you. You'll have lots of success with your course. And as far as peer review goes, just a note, because we are in the new Blackboard Learn system. And of course, your Critical Friends Wiki is here, so you can always get access to that from here over here. You each have your own page, so just sort of, go on the page that you are and, talk as much as you want, edit wiki content, and talk as much as you want. You guys might even have a little system where one has a, one color of font and somebody has another color of font or something. You can always change the colors right here. So that's, it's kind of totally up to you what you, how you handle group rules. But the wiki is there, and that'll be open all semester. You also have this peer review section for the instructional module. So the submission opens up pretty early in the semester, just in case somebody really powers through and winds up finishing it early. But of course, that might not be you, of course. You have all the way until towards almost the end of the semester to submit how we're supposed to access your course. So this is really just a submission so that someone can evaluate it, because if you don't submit something, then we can't evaluate it. So if you don't submit something before the date that's listed under submission dates, you might lose points, because we are not going to be able to assess you if you haven't posted anything. So submitting something is really important, and all you got to do is click in here, and I can't do this in preview mode. But all you would need to do is click in here and actually, let me go back to the student view. I think I still can't show you what this looks like, really, the way you'll see it. No, it's not even available yet right now, but it's just a text box where you submit things, and you just type in, tell us how to access your course. Are you a Blackboard, Lore, a Moodle, My Big Campus user? Tell us how we can log in. So, it could just be a sentence or two. Whatever it is, just let us know where you're at so that we can find your course, so that we can evaluate it. That next week until the end of the semester, that's when the evaluations are open. You'll assess at least one of your peers' courses. Typically, I assign them randomly, so so-and-so will just randomly assess so-and-so and so forth, and you'll use that Quality Matters rubric and send it to them, and there'll be a text box where you can write your comments and attach your rubric to them, and then I will do the same thing for you. So during that time, before the end of the semester, I will also submit a evaluation for you. Now, as far as the final presentation goes, this is really a lot of fun. We've done this now many times in this course, and it's always a blast. We present our instructional modules and any kind of spin you want to take on that with an Adobe Connect webinar. So this describes everything, of course, how this is all done. And the first part of this is to sort of plan it out. It's sort of a mini planning grid just for your webinar. So this is live. This is live and in full color. You presenting to us through the Adobe Connect system, which is pretty interesting, kind of fun. Definitely a little different, unless you might have maybe in your jobs at some point or another have given a webinar, or maybe even just participated in one and watched someone else do it. You know, it's a different experience. It's you have to do a lot of things at once. You're kind of looking at a lot of different things happening on the screen at once. It's really a different experience, but it's a really good experience to have even just once, so that you know what it is to facilitate a webinar. So what we'll do is first you'll outline sort of how your Connect webinar should run, basically. Because the biggest trick of this, which is probably the hardest thing for people, is that it is limited to 15 minutes. The reason why is because, webinars that get longer than that tend to get kind of boring. So we're concentrating two things. We're concentrating on keeping it short, and we're also concentrating on keeping it engaging. We want to actually engage the audience in the conversation. We don't want to just lecture at them for 15 minutes. We want to really think about how to get them involved in the conversation, maybe participating in a poll or offering their opinions or doing a quiz or something with you, so that they're really engaged and you're having some sort of interaction with them rather than just talking at them, which is no fun. If you've ever sat in a webinar that's like that, it's awful, right? So we don't want to have that happen to us. We want it to be interesting. So your template sort of prompts you along those lines. Talk about your topic. You can take it right off your ID plan. A lot of people sort of take a little bit of focus out of the topic. Maybe they deliver a little bit of a lesson from within their instructional module. Some people have simply driven us through the course and taken us on a tour, some people have done a scavenger hunt along with that tour and that kind of thing. That can be fun. A lot of people have done things where there was just a little bit from the topic that they chose, like for example, Karen with her Pavlov and operant conditioning. She did an operant conditioning lesson for us, and gave us some examples of, is this operant conditioning, is this not, and we had to tell her, yes it is, no it wasn't, and she would explain why it was or wasn't. So she had 3 or 4 different examples of Pavlov after she explained the whole theory to us briefly, and that was her whole webinar. Very quick. It went extremely well, and I do have her example available to you guys. You can watch it. It was pretty good. I have several examples for you guys to watch of people who did a really good job at engaging the audience and keeping their lesson nice and short and sweet. Because staying in that 15 minutes is hard. It really can be, and that's why making a nice step-by-step list, lesson plan for yourself is really helpful, because then you can actually mark on there, introductions 3 minutes, Q&A 2 minutes, show lesson 5 minutes, whatever it is. And so you can see at a glance that each of the things that you have planned are going to take a certain number of minutes, and then you can sort of look at it and go, do I really think this is only going to last for 2 minutes? Do I see this being a problem, etc.? So it gives you a chance to revise and focus on the stuff that's really important and keep yourself on task. It's really, really easy to overplan. So putting the little numbers of minutes each thing is going to take up, and then add them all up to see if you get to 15 or go over 15, really, really does. It's a very helpful tool for a lot of people. Many people use PowerPoint slides, and I'll show you a few in a minute of what that might look like. Of course, the examples that you can see will show you that as well. So I would definitely suggest relying on some PowerPoint slides. they don't need to be fancy. They don't need to be, lots of animations and all kinds of crazy things. And there's probably not going to be that many slides because it's a short presentation. But it is a good thing to help you stay focused and to frame the presentation. You can share slides in Adobe Connect, so it's really easy for us to all focus together on your visual aid. And of course, you might have some sort of an assessment built in, whether that's a quick survey at the end, or maybe during the session you're asking questions and the audience is responding. That's a very common thing many people do. Some people do a little thing at the end, like a survey in Qualtrics or SurveyMonkey, where we actually go and click on something and fill it out. Some people even provide us with some homework, some stuff to do before the session even ever started. Like, say, watch a video on YouTube or something like that, because Adobe Connect doesn't do a great job at displaying video for us. So, plus it's going to take a lot of time out of your presentation. So if you had us watch a video that was, really useful for your presentation before we actually start your presentation, then we'll all be a lot better off, and we'll be more informed when we come into your webinar too. So our Adobe Connect webinar itself will be done in pretty much the latest and greatest version of Adobe Connect. It was just recently updated down at Purdue. This is a system-wide software that we all have access to at Purdue. It's not a real cheap software to have. You can get trials and things like that and try it. There's a personal version of it to try. This one runs off a central server and allows us to do lots of cool meeting type stuff. If you've ever used GoToMeeting or anything like that, you're sort of already familiar with what Adobe Connect does and looks like. I do have a brief YouTube that someone at Adobe did that does a really nice job at showing off each of the tools. I actually also have last semester's recording of a live session that was done with some 575 students and all their different Q&As that they had, some of the demos that we did and things like that. We were using the older version of the system at the time, but you basically get the same ideas, plus you might benefit from listening to some of the answers to some of their questions. And you might also want to look at some of their recordings from previous semesters. For example, we had talked about Nettie's ID plan just a bit ago, and Nettie had done a kind of a fun Adobe Connect webinar. She had done something with her students. Her actual kindergarten students, live, true kindergarten students, were living and online. And of course, if listening to this, you'll be able to see, you'll be able to listen to them as well. They're a lot of fun. This is a really good one to watch just because it's fun. But she had done a great job with managing them as her audience. And since this was the online class, she was able to do this. And, we weren't conducting these online, we weren't conducting these in the classroom. So hers is definitely a fun one to check out, just because it's different. And she did such a great job at managing her little audience, including me. I was part of the audience too, but she really did a great job at prompting the kids and managing them, and it's fun. It's a really different way to do things. The other three people here, David, Emily, and Anne-Marie, had also done really good jobs at prompting the audience and building in activities that were fun. And kept us going, kept us engaged. David was a really good speaker. He provided us with a lot of detail about his subject without going overboard, and that was going to be difficult because that wasn't exactly he had chosen AutoCAD, which is not not an easy subject to learn on the fly. So there he is. And you can watch through this as he goes. He had two of us there. So again, this was the online class. He had two of us going. And we discussed AutoCAD stuff, and he gave us pictures of things. And we were supposed to decide whether they were meeting his module assessment or not, if they were CAD or if they were this building integrated something or other. I almost forget now. But I did learn a lot from this one because I did not know much about the subject prior to listening to his presentation. So it's kind of an interesting one. And again, the other two, I won't show all of them to you. You can watch them on your own. Of course, they're about 15 to 20 minutes long each because that's about what we had. Notice I do usually give people time to wrap up if they're running close to their 15, if they need another, 3, 4, 5 minutes to wrap up, get questions answered, that kind of thing. That's okay. So plan for 15, but realize that you probably have about 20 for your actual, beginning to ending presentation. So with that said, I do want to point out and open up the actual Adobe Connect interface. You just saw what it looked like, the older version. And so the newer version is just a little different. And the lesson plan template is here. And number 3 is our meeting room. So we actually have our own meeting room. It's actually the same meeting room I've been using since time eternal. It's been around for a long time. I can log in as myself. You will log in as a guest. So keep that in mind. You will log in as a guest into this. In fact, why don't we go ahead and log in as a guest so that you can see what that looks like. As a guest, you do have certain privileges. You can upload files and things. There's just a few things that you're not allowed to do that I can do, like rearrange the little module pods and things like that. And there it is. It started. You can see it's not too different visually. I mean, other than some colors and that sort of thing. Visually, it's not too different. You've got your camera and voice. You can start your webcam, and that starts up your microphone. You can also run some things from up here. The menus are a little bit more obvious in this version as opposed to the last version, which is nice, because it's got a whole section just for audio. That's probably the most challenging part of the entire Adobe Connect experience, is getting people to have their microphones working properly, especially when we're in the computer lab. Sometimes we have some real issues with making our computers in the computer lab working properly with Adobe Connect. They do all have internal microphones, but I would suggest that you bring your own microphone and headphone set so that you can just hear, because we don't have that many headphones, unfortunately, in the lab. So, I will probably be asking you repeatedly to try and remember to bring your own microphones and headsets if you are in the online or in the hybrid version of the class. If you're online, you'll be at home and we won't have those kinds of issues. But if we're on campus together, it'll still be remote because you'll go to a different room to deliver your presentation. Everyone else will hang out in the lab, or they could certainly log in from home as well. In fact, presenters can log in from home if they prefer to, if they don't anticipate having any kind of crisis technology moments. Rarely will you, but sometimes people do. They have trouble with their audio or something like that, and of course it's panic inducing if you're getting ready to present anything. And certainly I've had my own experiences with that, and everybody does. It's just sort of tricky. If you do happen to have anything where you need access for something, it will always prompt you with an ask you to do something. You can actually see now that my microphone is working, and if somebody else was on with me, they would be able to listen to what I was saying because it's got the little movement bars. So it's showing that it's recognizing my microphone and that it's sensing my voice. I can also hear, if somebody was speaking to me, I would be able to hear what was going on there. And of course, if you're not speaking, it's probably not a bad idea to mute your microphone to let other people talk, because when you start having people talking over each other, you can have all kinds of terrible. Be aware of, there's some issues with manners and things like that. And actually the video of the Q&A with other students, we do cover some of those politeness issues a little bit. But of course, with every time you have a little tab next to these things, you can, choose things like, mute me or disconnect me, set settings, adjust volumes, those kinds of things. It's even got a little, visual indicators of things like if you're if you're an audience member and your presenter is not speaking clearly enough, you can always just put your little icon up there and they'll see, oh, somebody says I should talk louder, or somebody says, speed up. These are the kinds of things I might send to you, I might put things like that, or I might even put something in the chat. You've got a nice chat window, and I can put things in here like, I think this is great, I love Connect, or whatever you want to say, right? And you guys can have a conversation about what's happening, and you can even choose where it says everyone. If there's other speakers, other people to talk to, then their names would show up here too. So you could select just a certain person and send them a private message. So you can actually have side conversations if you'd like to. There is a discussion notes area where everyone would see whatever the notes are. Everyone sees these. And of course the sharing. You can share one screen, a document. You can even see stuff that's been recently shared. And, I've cleaned it out so we don't have that many recently shared things, but I do have a training module here, which is Dan's presentation from last semester is still here. So, yours will probably be sitting here too after a while. They all sit in limbo. But you only need to share them once, and it does store things for you. So, and as the presenter, you can click through. In fact, anybody can click through, but we all see what's happening. So you don't want to click through slides to see what's coming up next when someone else is presenting, because everybody sees you doing that. So you want to make sure that you don't actually do that on someone, because it's pretty disconcerting. You can also do things like a whiteboard. And some people have done this with a fair amount of success, as far as it's got a little, things for drawing, right? So if you want somebody to draw a picture for you, or if you want to draw a picture for them, like you're diagramming something, this is a great tool for that. You can even insert these tools onto a PowerPoint slide, so you could actually have people draw on a slide. Last semester, Monica Korzeniecki had done a lesson about logo recognition because she was doing a graphic design module, and so she had a series of logos, and we had to write in what the logo represented, what company it came from. So like a little apple, and we had to write Apple by it if we knew it. So it was almost like a little contest where we had to get in there before somebody else got in there and selected their item. So it was kind of fun. That was a great way to induce interaction, because it got us talking, it got us engaging and having a little bit of fun. So that was definitely a great activity, sort of almost like a quiz, but not quite. Of course, anytime you're ready to stop sharing, just stop sharing. So you can see how user-friendly this is. This is a really simple interface. It's really easy to get along with. It's definitely not scary at all. So you can even share your own screen. So if you want to have someone seeing something you're seeing on your screen, you can just pull up your screen. And of course, if I share my screen, you won't be able to see what's happening, except that it'll take you away, and then if somebody were on the other end, they would see me poking around on my Safari or whatever it is I'm doing, and they would still hear me if I was speaking through the microphone, and they would still see my little webcam and that kind of thing. And if I needed to pull back up Adobe Connect, I could just pull it back up, and so I could check the chat or do anything else I need to do here. And of course, when I'm done, I just stop sharing it. So there's lots of different options for working with Adobe Connect. As I showed you, there are lots of resources for working with Adobe Connect, so it's not meant to be scary at all. It's not meant to be, heart palpitating, inducing stress. It's meant to be fun. So, nobody is an expert webinar giver in our class, including myself. It's hard to manage the chat and talk and do activities and everything all at once. It's sort of a experience. It's the experience of doing that, of trying to do that in the first place. It's a really good experience to have. It's really kind of a fun thing. Treat it as that. Try something new, try something maybe you've never tried before in a presentation. This is your chance, to really do something a little different. So really have fun with it. enjoy the ride. Don't over plan. Just, even if you kind of under plan a little bit. That's why sharing with your friend is so important, because you have this lesson plan and the outline. Share with your friend before you ever get into presenting. So we'll all have a chance to look at it and tell you, hey, that's, I don't know about that, maybe you're not on the right track, or hey, I really like that, that's a great idea, etc. So you have time to brainstorm and really come up with the best way to cover what it is that you're trying to do. So again, don't let it, people do get kind of stressed out about this, and I really don't want you to, because it's not supposed to be stress inducing, it's supposed to be fun. So hopefully you will find it fun. This is separately graded, so it's the whole thing, all the planning and stuff of it is a 65-point thing. So you've got all your presentation, your engagement, and the participation, and you'll also do a little bit of peer review. So there is a board for this, where you can give peer review to at least one of your fellow teammates. Just let them know how they did. Did they do everything right? Was there something they could have done differently? Could they have spoken up, or maybe not spoken as quickly, or maybe sped it up a little bit, something like that. Those are the kinds of things. Just nothing fancy, just maybe a paragraph, just saying, hey, great job, I really liked what you did here. I thought maybe you could have done something different here. Whatever. Give them a little constructive feedback, because obviously, just like you, this was probably their first webinar too. So, go easy on them, but help them out and give them some constructive criticism. They'll certainly appreciate it. And that is a discussion board. That's not not one of these bad boys. You're going to submit it and evaluate it. So that's a traditional discussion board. So that is the completion of the instructional module, start to finish. We started almost at the very end of the beginning of the semester. We go all the way down to the wire. So this is something that builds over time. Don't let it overwhelm you, because it does build over time. You don't just, put it all together in a week. And I definitely wouldn't suggest doing that if you are one of those procrastinator types. Start it when it starts, and take your time with it and really plan it out, and try new things. This is supposed to be fun. This is supposed to be a way for you to experiment with maybe an environment you've never tried to design in before, so you can really put your instructional design and your graphic design and all those other skills that you've learned to the test, and see what happens when you put all your great ideas online. And I really look forward to seeing what you come up with, and participating as one of your online students and webinar members. Have fun.